Delvena, Brain Love. I'm here with attorney Miss Sue Ann Robinson. Hey, counsel.
What's up? It's your favorite lawyer at Not Just a Lawyer, Sue Ann Robinson.
Hey, everybody. Hey, so we're on Instagram, and so I want you guys to know that we're paying attention to you. We have Facebook here. Smile, Facebook.
Hi, Facebook.
So, Dr. Delvena, we're live on Dr. Delvena on Facebook. Being a doll is usually the better look, but you know, I wanted to go on the professional page instead and not from my personal page. So it's Dr. Delvena, and I have a special guest in the champagne room. Everybody say, hey, Brain Love, a good Brain Love, hey, to Esquire, the attorney, Sue Ann Robinson.
Hello.
And so we're in the champagne room, and of course, you know what we have to have.
Champs.
And so
Champagne
our sponsor.
For my real pain. Champagne for my real friends.
Ah, okay.
Real pain
I like
for my
that.
sham friends.
And the sponsor is Voov. We're going to get started and get right into the discussion tonight. We're talking about R. Kelly.
Yeah.
So get yourself a drink also. Grab a drink. Grab something to snack on, whatever. We got a discussion going. I'm analyzing from the mental health perspective and
I'll analyze from the legal perspective.
So let's see. So everyone knows R. Kelly, who was acquitted of a crime in 2014, the last one. So he was acquitted in 2014, has been charged again with how many counts? 10 counts. 10 counts. And Esquire, how many years do each of those counts carry? What's the possibility?
So 25 to life. But he's probably gonna, you know, die in jail.
Gotcha. So basically you're saying he's facing a lot of time. Now I read somewhere 10 counts, and each count there's a possibility, I guess a range of years, how you guys do it in the legal system, up to 7 years for each count?
No, well, for the highest level of felony, he could get up to 25 years.
Wow. So he was charged with a felony that could get him 25 years by that one charge by itself.
Right, so then each one. So he's got, I mean, you know, if he gets convicted, he'll be gone for a while. And
listen, how old is R. Kelly, guys? He's over 50. R. Kelly, I believe, is 52. So, I mean, do the math. He's going away for life. And so this is I'm not, obviously, I'm the psychiatrist here, but it looks like he'll be convicted this time.
Could be. I mean, based on, you know, the court of public opinion, certainly he's been convicted. So that's usually 50% of the battle.
So with this case, can he choose to have a jury duty or to appear in front of a judge, or how does that work?
No, he's going to have a jury trial, pretty sure. And, you know, I think whoever tries the case, if they haven't been under a rock, is going to know, like, his situation. You know, in jury selection, they'll do their best to vet out people that are going to be biased or people that would say that things they've heard about the case would influence them. But at the end of the day, you know, we're humans. We're not computers.
So let's go backward a little bit and kind of look at R. Kelly's timeline.
Okay.
Right? So there is a mental health timeline, and there's also a legal aspect too. Okay. Because R. Kelly has shared some information to the public about certain things that have happened to him in the past.
It's known that he was sexually abused. Was that something that he disclosed, or was that something somebody else disclosed? Because I know it was in that R. Kelly docuseries, but I'm just curious if he ever actually...
from what I read, R. Kelly disclosed it.
Okay.
And I think that disclosure came later.
Okay.
I don't think it's something that he was open about early on in his career.
Okay.
And nothing like that. I believe that, for me, my interpretation, it was that was his justification for
what he was doing.
Certain behaviors.
Okay.
Yes, that was used to justify, hey, this happened to me. I was abused too. So what we do believe, and what we know actually from statistics, a lot of people who were abused as a child or were previously abused, sometimes they also turn into the abuser.
Okay.
And so obviously that's not true in every case, guys. I'm not saying that. But that is something that is not uncommon for someone, I don't want to block you over here, for someone to be who was abused to then become the abuser later in life. Okay. So at age 12, R. Kelly said he experienced, or R. Kelly said later in life that at age 12, quote, experienced a lot of things at a very young age that I didn't know I was supposed to. including, close the quote, pardon me, including witnessing older youth rape one of his girlfriends.
Oh, wow.
So that's something else that was traumatic to him. He claims that he saw a girlfriend be raped by some of his friends. He also said later, in I guess a separate interview, that when he was younger, that family members actually molested him, sexually abused him. Okay. The assumption is that these family members were female cousins. That's the assumption.
Okay, the thing that really stood out for me in his timeline, and you could, obviously this is your specialty, was that his music teacher was like saying that he was disclosing to her that he had, or she was aware that he was dating or dealing with younger women, and she repeatedly kept saying to him, you gotta stop.
His music teacher, like, so how old was he during, I guess, during the
I think it was his music teacher in high school. It was an older lady in the docuseries, and it wasn't like somebody relaying her testimony. She was actually the one saying, you know, I would tell him, you got to stop with these young girls.
Wow. So she basically went on record, so to speak,
right?
Or in an interview said that in high school, she recalls that in high school he displayed these types of behaviors.
Yeah,
also.
it was either high school or middle school. She was saying that the way he was expressing himself in music and the things that he would sing about and write about were, I guess, sexually explicit or advanced. And then later on, because they kept in contact, they kept a close relationship, she would kind of like give him advice and say he should stop dating young girls or being around young girls.
Right.
After he was an adult.
Gotcha. So, and you know, those types of behaviors, so the explicit songwriting, the behaviors, oftentimes when someone has been abused, sexually especially, they do things like they act out. So certain behaviors, they become promiscuous. They do things like how he expressed himself in his music by writing those very explicit type lyrics. And I believe because he was probably damaged at a young age as far as sexual abuse goes. And we're going to get to some of your comments and your questions. I just kind of want to lay the foundation with Attorney Robinson, not just a lawyer. So that way you guys have some basic foundation, because maybe everyone hasn't been following this case. So the first question I'd like to ask you, though, is this. 1994, August 31st. R. Kelly, at the age of 27, marries 15-year-old R&B singer Aaliyah.
Right.
The couple weds in a secret ceremony arranged by R. Kelly at a hotel in Chicago. The marriage is annulled some months later because of Aaliyah's age. And so we know from some of the doc-series that people have said and admitted that some of the staff in Chicago, that they did some underhanded things or deceitful things so that R. Kelly could get a marriage license to marry Aaliyah. So here's my question. Is that admissible in court?
The story of him being married to Aaliyah.
The legal documentation that he married a 15-year-old. Is that admissible?
It could be relevant, but usually prior bad acts are not admissible.
Wow. Wow.
Just to show somebody's propensity or tendency, that's usually not allowed.
So if I'm R. Kelly's attorney, I'm overruling. Or I'm sorry, I'm objecting.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Objection.
See why I should stay in my lane?
No.
So
you were there though. You were in the right area of the highway.
I object.
She was there. So
yes,
object.
So if I'm his attorney, I would object if the other attorney says, hey, you married a 15-year-old in 1994, so we're establishing you have this pattern of behaviors.
Right.
Because in mental health, we look at patterns of behaviors when we're trying to help someone, when we're developing a treatment plan, when we're trying to diagnose, but I guess legal.
Right, unless he's going to introduce, if he opens the door, like let's say he uses a mental health issue as a defense, and then he has a mental health expert testify, and then that person is testifying about him being sexually abused, and the Aaliyah thing comes up, then he opens the door.
I see. So all of the things that we're all like, oh, slam dunk, he did this, he did that, he did this, those things may not even be admissible in court.
Right.
Wow.
But I mean, with all due respect, based on the level of competence that his legal team has been showing so far, I mean, I don't know.
Please put it out there. Yes. Let's segue and talk about that, shall we?
Well, okay. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and, you know, poo-poo on anybody's legal strategy, but at the same damn time, I just wouldn't have my client, who historically can only articulate themselves through song, do a national interview with Gayle King, like one of the top journalists, interviewers nationally. I just wouldn't have him do a sit down without prepping, at least.
So you agree that he appeared to be unprepped?
Oh, absolutely.
He was not prepared.
He was bamboozled, led astray, unprepped. Yeah. He was just...
Why would his legal team do that to him?
But... Right.
I suggested yesterday that he fire his entire team. Fire them all, R. Kelly.
And the stylist, because the outfit, everything, top to bottom. They didn't give you no fresh cut. They ain't do nothing for you. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah. And so, you know, as soon as the interview started, what did he do? So, because I know attorneys also look at, and judges and, you know, people in the courtroom, sometimes you look for evidence that someone is lying or not telling the truth. And especially when you're what is it called? Not cross-examining, but when you're questioning someone on the stand. Or,
just taking testimony.
Yeah, so I think sometimes when you can tell that someone is not telling the truth, or there's a hole in the story, or there's an inconsistency, you guys as attorneys, it's like blood to a hound or a dog. You just jump all over it and you tear their story apart on the stand.
Right. Which I'm like, that's what Gayle King is trained to do. Like, that's her whole job. She interviews people. She's, you know, an investigative journalist in the sense that she's very tough. So I'm just like, you just sent him to the slaughter.
Yeah.
Basically. I mean, you could have just, I think with prep, it would have been better. Emotionally, he would have been a bit better. But I don't know, you know, just based on my own personal feelings about the case, that I want his legal team to be any more competent. But I'm just but legally speaking, you know, putting a client out there without prepping them, without, you know, even being there, because it didn't seem like anybody was even there in the room. Because I know when I have clients that do press, I'm sitting right there.
Yes,
and I'm listen, like, we're good.
The part when he decompensated and totally fell apart. And so you guys may remember this if you watched the interview. He jumped up out of his chair and he started to yell. Before he jumped up, use your common sense. Then he jumped up and he started to yell, and he started crying. He started getting angry. And his publicist, I think they said that a man came over to settle him down. And Gayle King said in a separate interview that she wasn't sure what he was going to do when that happened. And even the staff watching said they weren't sure if R. Kelly was going to do something, if he was going to run out, if, you know, if this was going to lead to something else. Because
but they kept them cameras rolling.
Of course they did.
They kept them rolling.
And he said, do you have the camera on me? Are you watching me? Are the cameras rolling? I want to say this. So my point here is his team was nowhere in sight, as you said, because they would have been somewhere in the background motioning to him, STFU, be quiet, because you're looking bad. You're not. You're not helping yourself.
Yeah. If R. Kelly was my client, which he's not, thankfully, but I would have put my whole body in the shot, and then we would have had to wrestle out the shot. You know what I'm saying? Like, sir, you're not gonna ruin my case. No. We're gonna take this somewhere else. We're going in the bathroom.
So listen, well, they said he does not have any money. He owes $160,000 in back child support. He has legal fees. And one of these, and we'll go over this, some of the legal settlements he's had from his past. One of the settlements they have documented as he settled the case at $250,000. I don't understand how he doesn't have any money. Well, this is a guy who sold millions of albums,
and he wrote a lot of songs for people.
Yes, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston.
But they did stop. But they didn't stop playing songs he wrote. I just want to understand how he's saying he doesn't have any money, but he can support not one, but 2 girlfriends.
Isn't his house in foreclosure? One of his houses, or his primary residence, was in foreclosure.
So you think they're living like it's like a bunker, like they sleep on a mattress?
No, I just think he probably has a lot of old stuff there from before. I don't know what he's been doing with his money. It's probably not an excessively nice home.
Okay.
Like, I'm not thinking that.
But it's probably just something he's had for a while.
Yeah, just
Okay,
something he's had
sense.
for a while there in Illinois, Chicago, somewhere in the suburbs. So look, before we take our first question, I actually want to mention something. Everyone was kind of like, ooh, ah, when they said how much his bail was. They said his bail at $1 million. Okay, listen to this.
10%.
And right, yes, okay, exactly. So for those of you who don't know, you only have to pay
10%.
10%. And so a stranger paid his 10%, his $100,000, right?
Right,
Some lady.
a woman, yes.
Yeah. So listen, that's today in 2019, $1 million in bail. June 5th, 2002, Kelly is indicted in Chicago on 21 counts of child pornography. This is a case we all know about, stemming from the sex tape. He pleads not guilty, and his bail in 2002, 17 years ago, was $750,000.
Inflation, they raised
So,
it for inflation.
yeah, so not that much different than this $1 million.
Right.
Is there accountability for the parents? Yeah, can we call, so in Florida we have DCF. Can we call DCF on a parent who allows their 13-year-old to go and sleep in the bed with a known child molester or sexual abuser? Can that be considered, you know, parenting neglect, or is that reportable?
I think it's reportable.
I think so
you
too.
could report it and they could investigate it. I don't know how well
Exactly
they're going to do on that, but you definitely could. You could report it.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that's kind of endangering the welfare of your child.
Absolutely.
So if you're allowing a 13-year-old to date a grown man, that's endangering the safety of your child, the welfare of your child. The account, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say Azriel and Jocelyn because I did catch some of their interview today, and it was interesting that they said, or they claimed, allegedly, that their parents, when they brought them to R. Kelly, told them to lie and say they were 18.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Which I thought was interesting because it was kind of like, did they know that the kids would be turned away? Or is this just something that R. Kelly's telling them to say because he's basically raised them since they were kids? Like, just interesting. But I think with the parents, definitely there should be some accountability in terms of, you know, someone at this level, this visible, is allowed to do something like this for so long only because they have people assisting or enabling.
Right. Yeah, he had a lot of enablers in his circle. People supporting his efforts to rape young kids, basically. So
what's their mindset? Like, what do they think they're doing? Like, you know, from a psychological perspective, like what state are you in when you're participating in that?
So we know that children who are abused, a lot of times the profile, it's someone who may come from a broken home. It could be someone who there's financial issues in the home. There's some type of neglect there. It might be, and even in a two-parent home, you know, there can still be neglect. There can be issues with finances and a child feeling you know, not loved or not having security. So those are the types of things that can make a child more susceptible to being abused or, you know, participating in human sex trafficking. So, you know, that's what we think of, that's the typical thing. However, with these young ladies, I'd like to say that I read somewhere that there wasn't any of that, like a two-parent home, no financial issues.
The parents were kind of like involved in their lives because they were trying to help them with these careers and you know, they weren't street kids.
Now, so you know, and that's a good point, that starstruck, you know, people who are just so in love with entertainers and celebrities who'll do whatever it takes. Because we know, you've seen young kids passing out when Michael Jackson would get out of the car or go to a concert. New Edition, growing up, how, you know, everyone was so in love with New Edition, and little girls less than the age of 18 would be in the audience and screaming and yelling, "I love you," and things like that. However, a lot, you think that most of these celebrities or these artists or entertainers, they don't act on it. And I'll tell you, in the 8 years that I worked in the prison, the pedophiles that I've treated don't admit to being pedophiles. Yeah, it could be you know, a gargantuan load of evidence against the person, and they don't admit to the wrongdoing. They just will not admit to it. So
I'm just thinking all the time of a defense that could be mounted, and you know, if he does go with a psychological defense that he has some mental issue, is there anything he could...
It ain't gonna work.
No.
And you know, the reason being is this. He has no history that we are aware of. And if he had a history, it would have come out already, I think. If he had a history of being previously formally diagnosed with something or receiving treatment, what I see in R. Kelly is basically he's a psychopath. He has, I believe, either antisocial traits. And so most people think antisocial means you're not socializing. You don't want to go to the party, or you're staying in your house, you're isolating. Antisocial is actually a clinical term. Antisocial means that you do the opposite of what's right. You're always breaking rules, you're breaking the law, you're sneaking and manipulating people. The person may be, you know, very nice and very charming, but then on the other extreme, they're a monster. So R. Kelly has shown evidence or behaviors that are consistent with someone who's antisocial. A lot of cover-up, a lot of misrepresentation, and obviously, you know, we're not inside of his head. We don't have the hardcore evidence or facts because we're not living his life. But you and I both are professionals, and you know, we kind of we know when there's a red flag that suggests that there's something going on. So, mental health problem. Usually with the courts, they want to know your history. Have you ever been admitted to a psych facility or a hospital? Ever tried to kill yourself? Did you seek treatment like in an office, an outpatient area, or, you know, going to see someone like a mental health professional, a therapist, a psychiatrist, where you ever prescribe medications? All of those things come into play when the judge, I don't know if you would call it discovery, but when he requests that information or that collateral, to make, I guess, to support the claim that someone's client has a mental health problem.
What I think I would do if I was the prosecutor, I would try to introduce songs, like aging them but a number. I'd be like, ladies and gentlemen,
but it was Aaliyah's song. But R. Kelly wrote it.
He wrote and produced the entire album and then married her.
Isn't a statute of limitations for what he's being charged with? This is for the lawyer.
Well, if you guys recall what just happened with Bill Cosby, there's been some changes to how the statute of limitations works for sexual abuse cases, but also this is evidence and crimes that were essentially, I believe what the state is going to say, they were concealed. Like, I remember from the docuseries, the witnesses or the people in there were talking about how R. Kelly taped everything. Like, he taped all his stuff, like all the time he had a camera. And to me, I was like, well, where the hell are all these tapes? It's 2019, the tape's gotta be somewhere. Sure, there's nowhere to play a VHS tape anymore, but the tapes must exist still if he was taping them. And you can tell me, they were saying that people who commit these type of crimes want to keep souvenirs, and that's why he was recording them. So I can't imagine that he destroyed the videos, so they have to be somewhere, like someone has them or knows where they are. Okay? No, I absolutely think that, you know, and that's why I discussed the things that his legal team were doing, because you are innocent until proven guilty. But the court of public opinion is something different, and that's what he stepped into when he went to the interview with Gayle King. He was trying to plead his case in front of the public. He wasn't in court, and so when he did that, he subjected himself to social media, people's opinions, obviously other people that are going to analyze his behaviors and what he's doing to look for signs of him being innocent or guilty. So I think the idea of innocent until proven guilty applies in a courtroom, absolutely, and it should apply generally. But I think he went to the court of public opinion by exposing himself in that way, by saying, I'm gonna go do this national interview. And when he did that, he subjected himself to people's opinions, which a lot of people's opinion is that he's guilty.
So 2 things, I just want to be clear. Pedophilia, you don't have to engage in a sexual act. There doesn't have to be any kissing. It doesn't have to be any of that. Pedophilia is being sexually attracted to children, to minors. So typically before puberty. So children, you know. Now that's where a fine line, because I think the youngest I've heard is age 13. Right? So
is that why I thought it was interesting when she asked are you an older man that likes younger women? And he said, no, I don't look at age, I look at legal. And I get it, because he can't articulate himself, okay, unless it's a song. So if Gail was like, Robert, what do you like? He could have been like, I like this. It would have been much, much better, but he didn't have the opportunity. They weren't singing. So I think what he was trying to say was he looks at whether the person's of legal age, and then he goes from there, which is still kind of weird. But, I try my best to kind of interpret through the person's lens, because, that's my job sometimes. So I'm like, okay, I get what you're trying to say. You sound crazy. But I get what you're trying to say. You're trying to say you don't say I like young women. You're just saying you like people who are of legal age. Still weird. Still creepy.
And let's not forget, besides being attracted to young girls, the other part of these charges include what is the legal term? How he held them hostage, didn't feed them. So is kidnapping one of the charges in the list of?
I think it's it's like a kidnapping charge, in the sense that the idea is that he was supposedly keeping these people against their will, which I think he talked about that, and he was saying that I think that's when he got the most upset, because he was like, I never kept anyone against their will.
Legal age of consent varies from state to state, right? So there's, and listen at me talking like I'm the attorney, but from what I know, state to state it's different.
On the highway. It is different from
so real talk, when you're raising children, these are things you have to know, because especially if you have young men at home, right? I have a son. You want him to be aware of certain things, because if he decides that maybe he's attracted to a girl who's more than 4 years, his minor or younger than he is, or more than 3 years, or
sometimes if he's 18 and she's 17 and they're in the same grade.
Exactly that. So these are things that you have to discuss with your children. This is real life stuff, not just R. Kelly stuff, but you have to know what the law is in your state, so that your child doesn't get charged with sexual abuse or pedophilia or something like that. What's another, besides pedophilia, what are some other charges that come with, like you said, in certain states, if you're 18 and she's 17 or he's 17.
Statutory rape.
That's what I was looking for. Statutory rape. So statutory rape is something...
It just means that by statute it's rape, even though the person may have consented.
But they're not legal age.
But they're not of legal age, so under the statute it's considered rape.
Okay. So, grooming, a lot of things take place with grooming. Typically, the person is nice. They're always nice to the minor. They do things for the minor to help them, to make them trust them. So grooming includes gaining their trust, making, and it's so much more than just like the rapport they establish with that person, but they get that person to believe in them, to trust in them, so much that their own parents are no longer considered to be like their authority. Come closer. Their own parents are no longer considered their authority, because this person who has stepped in, sort of like a father figure or mother figure or whatever, they've gained their trust to the point of, like with these young girls, leaving their homes to live with R. Kelly. So there was a grooming process with these two young women who spoke in the interview today. How did they say how old they were when they met R. Kelly?
I think they said they were 14 and their parents encouraged them to lie.
They were 14?
Yeah, and their parents told them to say that they were 18.
Now, I think for me, a concern with these cases is that and this is why I find it to be pathologic, or to be something more serious than just these girls' parents gave them permission to be with R. Kelly, and he then hung out with them, brought them into their homes or whatever. He isolated them. From their stories with the doc series, these girls all talked about being isolated. And that's something that happens too when you're being groomed by an abuser. They isolate you from your source of support, from your family members. Now the question would be, well, how supportive were these parents anyway, considering they allowed their children, allowed their children to become a part of his cult, as some people are calling it. So I think the isolation part for me is what kind of, it makes it a more serious issue than just he likes young girls. What is it?
Is there any psychological not diagnosis, but term, because a lot of people talk about how, well, the girls were fast. They're fast. And that's why they were, you know, chasing him or trying to date him or, you know, putting themselves in a position to be around him because these were fast teenagers as opposed to unfast.
Right.
But I don't, you know, is there anything that, like an official term or some sort of...
you mean for the young women?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, that's not a disorder. Sometimes you think of precocious, but precocious is not necessarily me liking an older man. What some people may have called back in the day being fast or hot in the pants, or looking fast or hot in the pants. Sometimes boys and girls develop early. They develop certain signs of advancing into puberty early, so people consider that precocious, or maybe the way that they think is a little more advanced. But young women who like older men, that's not a disorder. That is something where, as a parent, you have to teach your children from a young age what's appropriate and what isn't.
Boundaries.
Yep, boundaries. And when you see them doing certain things, you have to intervene, and you have to communicate to them and say, although you really love R. Kelly's and his singing, you know, he's an artist, and it's okay to love his music, but that's where it ends. And I think for a lot of these girls, I'll say for a significant number of young women and boys who express themselves sexually, explicitly, it's because they've probably been exposed previously to some sort of sexual act, or were abused or were molested. Something may have taken place, and more than likely took place somewhere in their childhood or their history, that predisposes them to behave this way or to act that way.
Okay.
Oftentimes that is the case.
So should we talk about the double jeopardy thing?
Yeah, let's do that. So we're almost 45 minutes in, right? So let's talk about, I think that to me was like the most important question, because he even said it.
Right.
You can't double jeopardy me.
Right.
You can't double jeopardy me, like it was a verb.
And so the whole him yelling out, they're double jeopardying me. It's not only grammatically incorrect, it's also legally incorrect.
Someone on Facebook is saying how when he grew up in South Carolina, that it was okay to, in the South, to date someone who was younger. And yes, we know that back in the day, certain things took place. So,
I think that goes more to the culture that speaks to women and tells girls that you mature faster than boys.
Right.
And so you're more mature. And so a lot of times I think part of their grooming is that the older man is like, well, you are mature. Right. Even though you're 14 or 15 or 16 and I'm 20 and some change, you just happen to be very mature for your age. And because society tells young girls, hey, you guys you mature faster than boys, it kind of goes with that narrative. I wonder why. Where did that start? If you know, like, I feel like it's...
And you mean physically mature?
Okay, is that what they're meaning? Okay.
Yeah, well, so I mean, in the way that I'm comprehending what you're saying, because it's true. So young girls can enter puberty before boys, and also the way that puberty takes place in a girl in comparison to a boy is different. Okay. So you know, obviously women, when we're maturing, manifestations of maturity physically means growing breasts, rounder hips, things like that. And so it's more pronounced. For boys, you're not really necessarily going to notice a whole lot, except he's getting taller, his voice is getting deeper, and he notices that his penis may be growing in length, or that he's growing hair in his genital area. So you're right, the puberty stage is the way it happens. It's just so pronounced for young girls, and it just makes them more it makes it more obvious that...
Okay, I thought I do think of it in that sense, but I always feel like the way that it was, the context was always that women are mentally maturing faster than boys, which is silly to me, because if you're 13 and he's 13, you guys are on the same level mentally. Like, what does that even mean when people say girls mature faster than boys? I always took it as to mean mentally.
Right.
I never thought of it physically, but physically,
you're right.
You know, it's
that
true.
Also.
But people do try to, or used to try to perpetuate that. And so I think a lot of times that, and I've had friends talk to me about this, especially when the R. Kelly thing started, saying, oh, well, I remember the old guys who used to hang out across the street from the high school and take everybody's girlfriend because the girls were like, oh, I want to date the older guys or whatever. But I think that was part of it, because there's a socialization that was saying, well, you're mentally this age, even though you're this age, so you shouldn't be attracted
you're 14,
to these
but you
boys.
really think like you're 17,
right?
So you can date a 17 or an 18-year-old,
or a 19 or a 20 or 20, you know.
Yeah, and that's where parental guidance comes in, and talking with your kids and communicating with them that it's not okay. And you're, excuse me, you're right. A lot of people have said that. Oh, when we were in school, and I remember being in high school, and some of the girls were dating guys in college. Right. And people turned a blind eye or looked the other way, or it was okay. It's one of those things where R. Kelly is in the limelight. He's famous. And I think, you know, because it happened so much, and that was just basically the basis of who he dated or who he dealt with personally. And then, like I said, besides dating younger women, the other issue is the sexual abuse, the isolation, the cult phenomenon, keeping them away from their families, tying them up, not allowing them to eat, not allowing them to leave the home. So those are also the other issues, not just that he was dating younger women. Do you think that the state's attorney can actually bring charges against the parents? Can that become another case?
Like, hey, listen, if there's some sort of check or there's some sort of wire transfer going to the parents' account every 2 weeks for the last 8 years and it's not explained in some way, then, and that's what I mean when I'm saying there has to be some sort of evidence to charge on, other than, you know, to say that they're aiding and abetting a crime or that it's some sort of conspiracy. You have to be able to demonstrate it. I mean, honestly, when I heard them saying it, it's not that I disbelieved it. It's just that the way that it sounded was not like it was their words.
Gotcha.
It sounded like, not how you would, how if you were really sold, you wouldn't explain it that way. You know, you might say my parents abandoned me or my parents left him with him, but would you actually say the words my parents sold me? Like if you were you thought of yourself as a transaction. It sounds like something that somebody else is saying. Hey, your parents sold you to me.
Now, were they selling their daughters allegedly so they could get singing careers? Is that the...
I guess
the allegation?
The allegation is that the parents were just trying to get money. And they were just like...
What a sloppy mess. Wow. So the double jeopardy. Is this double jeopardy? So the charges that he's been charged with now, those are not the same charges from over 10 years ago.
No.
I see someone is saying the parents are guilty. The parents are very guilty, and they should feel awful.
The whole team, his whole team, the security, the bookers, because somebody had to be booking flights for 15-year-olds, and you have to know the person's first name, last name, and their date of birth. So when you put in the date of birth, or you giving the date of birth to the travel agent, and you're like, oh, this person was born in the 90s. And you gotta be like, no.
I want to clarify something. We said this already. In different states, the laws are different. Every state doesn't have the same law. Some states allow a minor to marry an older person with the consent of the parents. The parents can sign and allow that minor to marry another person, you know, if they're underage. So thank you, Wayne Mingo. You're giving me all the evidence. I got it. But we know this. In certain states, the parents can sign and allow their child to marry an older man or a woman. But when that does not happen, then you may have a problem. There may be a problem legally.
May I say something? I think R. Kelly was doing really bad things. I don't know that jail is going to be the place. Unless, obviously, someone like yourself is there. To help him and really assist him through. I think that, you know, he'll just really languish. He'll really languish. I feel like he really should be. If all these things he's doing, and he's such a monster, he should be in a psych ward.
He should be. And I posted that some weeks ago, that R. Kelly should be committed to an inpatient psychiatric facility, a long-term, like a state hospital. Long-term, a state hospital, somewhere where he can go, because even if there's mental health care in the prison system, it's not going to be the same. He needs to be on someone's inpatient unit in a state hospital, getting daily treatment, going to groups, meeting with a therapist individually, meeting with a psychiatrist, getting medicated if he needs it. I totally agree, because the prisons are no place to rehabilitate someone who has such a severe mental illness as R. Kelly.
And for so long, allowed to, be in it for so long.
And with that, that's the last word, guys. Guys, thank you for your attention tonight. I'm glad that you joined us on Therapy Thursday. Thank you, Esquire, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I think it was a great discussion. We went over a lot of medical and legal. And I think one of the things I wanted people to hear about was that double jeopardy.
Double jeopardying. I can't even say it. But we can't leave without saying it. We can't leave without saying your phrase.
Exactly.
Can't do it. Come on.
Ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3. Brain love.